concentrated mind, one has to go through the process over and over. Initially, as one goes through, a lot of the parts won't stand out clearly as hard, but just occasionally one will start to pick up the sense of hardness at certain points. Maybe as one is going through from the top of the head, one could start to feel the hardness there or the solidity. Then one starts moving down the body, sort of in increments, till one is coming through the head, down the neck, then along the shoulders, well, each shoulder in turn, right shoulder, say, down, what do you call this? The biceps, the upper part of the arm, the lower part of the arm, the hand, the fingers, then do it with the left arm, then go down again from the neck, through the chest, to the belly, then down the back, from the neck, down the back, then down the buttocks, then over to the pubic area, even down the genitals, then down the legs, the thighs, the knees, the shins, the ankles, the feet, the toes, trying always to pick up the sense of hardness or solidity. And one has to keep on doing this over and over. It's a process of bhavana, of cultivation, until gradually the perception of solidity begins to stand out more and more clearly, until one could actually sort of scan the body, and it's almost like one is getting that sense of hardness and solidity throughout the whole body, as though one is picking up like grains of sand throughout the body. And then one could go to the other aspect of the earth element, softness. One takes a soft part of the body, like the flesh of maybe the upper arm or the belly, wherever one could feel softness. And then one starts in a similar way scanning the body to get the sense of softness and picking up the sense of softness throughout the body. Okay, so in this way one is starting to perceive the earth element in terms of hardness and softness. Then to get the liquid element, there are two ways to approach the liquid element, the water element. One is through the characteristic of flowing, or maybe just call it simply liquidity. So where does one get the sense of flowing? Well, basically I could think of two places, or two ways. Yeah, exactly. When one is sitting in a meditation room, the place where you can get the sense of flowing is most clearly is in the mouth. There's another place where you can get it, but I don't suggest picking up on that in the meditation room. It could be very embarrassing for oneself and troublesome for others. Yeah, so one could begin just by getting a sense of the saliva in the mouth. And then once one gets that sort of tactile sense of flowing or liquidity, then one starts exploring the rest of the body to pick up the sense of liquidity. Okay, then the other aspect of the liquid element is, this is according to the commentarial style or Abhidhammic style of explanation, is that the liquid element has the function of cohesion, that is, of binding together the particles of the earth element. And so one gets a sense of how the body coheres, how between the particles in the body there is this binding together. And one could actually, as the mind becomes more sensitive, one could get a sense of how the body is being sort of, how the body is cohesive throughout the whole body, from the top of the head all the ways down to the soles of the feet. And this is representing the cohesive function of the water element. Okay, then comes the fire element, and to pick up the fire element, one has to again sort of explore the body and see that the fire element is represented by the characteristics of heat, where there's a preponderance of the fire element, and coolness, where there's a deficiency or weakness of the fire element. So generally one would begin with the parts where you feel heat in the body is prominent. So one will just sit and just start attending to the body. It can be either the internal heat of the body, or if it's the hot climate is hot, the weather is hot, you feel a hotness around the body. But one picks up a clear perception of heat, and then one starts exploring the body internally to get a sense of the hotness, the natural bodily temperature, which is diffused throughout the whole body. And so one starts moving from the top of the head down through the face, the neck, shoulders, arms, trunk of the body, legs, down to the feet, experiencing the heat throughout the whole body. And then if there's any coolness becomes manifest, then you note that as a deficiency or weakness in the fire element. Okay, then the air element, where is one going to pick it up most clearly and distinctly? Yeah, in the in and out breathing. And so one can start by attending to the in and out breathing, but this is done in a different way from mindfulness of breathing. The objective here is not to be following each in-breath and each out-breath is continuously and consistently as possible, but to get a sense of motion, of movement, which is the distinctive mark of the air element. Also, it's said the air element has the characteristic of distension, that is, of sort of expanding out and then contracting in, expanding, contracting. And so one starts off with the in-breath and out-breath, but one could spread the attention throughout the body as one is breathing in and out, and one starts to notice that as one is breathing in, one starts to feel the whole body is sort of expanding with the in-breath, and as one breathes out, one feels the whole body contracting with the out-breath. With the out-breath, and so one starts to feel this in and out movement throughout the body with the in-breath and out-breath. And that gives one the entry to the air element. And then one will attend to motion throughout the body. So as one goes attending to the parts of the body, again from top to bottom, one feels or experiences either expansion, contraction, or subtle movements taking place throughout the whole body. And one recognizes that as the manifestation of the air element. And so in this way, one is getting the perception of the air element. Okay, so in this way, one is getting the distinct perception of each of the elements. Then at a certain point, sort of at a higher level of development, one starts combining the elements in pairs, so that one could take the earth element and the liquid element together, brings together the fire element and the air element, so one gets them in pairs. Then one could bring in to a pair a third element, and then bring in a fourth element, until one gets the perception of all four elements as being simultaneously present. Okay, and the meditation on the elements is somewhere sort of on the call it the twilight zone, or the border between both serenity meditation, or samatha bhavana, or samadhi meditation, and vipassana meditation, or the development of panya. Because one could, by focusing on the elements, one could gain concentration, though it's said that one can't develop jhana on the basis of the elements, but rather one will develop access concentration. But then one also uses the analysis or investigation of the body in terms of the four elements as part of the process of developing insight when one does what I call what the Visuddhimagga calls nama rupa vavatana. That's the delineation or discrimination of mentality and materiality. So the way to distinguish and to contemplate materiality is to contemplate the four great elements. And so the four great elements is recommended by the Buddha in the discourse to Rahula, where he brings in both the internal element and the external element. It becomes a way of developing very clearly the perception of non-self, of selflessness. Because one considers this body is made up of the four great elements, and the external world that's made up of the four great elements. So, for example, we take food, we have a plate of rice and tofu and chincai, green vegetables. Now it's external earth element, we eat it, and probably by sometime tomorrow it becomes internal earth element. And then part of the internal earth element that the body doesn't want to assimilate, tomorrow it becomes external earth element. And then we drink water or tea, you have the cup of tea, now it's external water element. I drink it, and before long it becomes internal water element. And then the cells are always discharging the liquid waste, which gets sent down to the kidneys and to the bladder. Then it gets discharged and becomes external water element. And then the air, constantly, moment by moment, external air gets breathed in, the oxygen gets extracted and sent to the cells, becomes internal air element, internal air element, and then the carbon dioxide from the cells and the other waste gases get discharged and expelled, and they become external air element. So there's constant interchange. So I call this body mine, or I think of the body as I, myself, and I think of the cup and the table as being just something completely external to me, but things that are external become internal, things that are internal become external. So it's all, the Buddha says, it's all to be seen as not mine, not I, not myself. Okay, at this point I'll ask whether any questions on, so far we've covered the foulness, elements. Maybe let me just finish the charnel ground contemplations, then we'll take questions. Okay, what is here called the charnel ground contemplations is a bit different from the cemetery meditations which are spoken of. It's some passages in the suttas where the Buddha speaks about the monk contemplating a corpse, also like 1 day dead, 2 days dead, 3 days dead, and then in different stages of decay. Of course, and then this is the meditation subject which is elaborated in 10 aspects in chapter I think it's chapter 6 in the Visuddhimagga. In that method of doing the cemetery contemplation, the meditator is actually supposed to go to the charnel ground to see the corpse in a particular stage of decay. Because in ancient India, when people were, I think when criminals were killed by the state, what they would do is just take them and throw them into a charnel ground, which would be, I guess, some distance from the town or village, and there the bodies would decay. And so animals, they wouldn't last in the state of decay very long because animals would come to chew them up and birds of prey would come to feast on them. And so it would be possible for monks who are intent on practicing that meditation to go off to the charnel ground and to see the corpses in different stages of decay. But in this meditation, it's actually clearer from the words used in the Pali text, but here it's translated as though he were to see, which in Pali is sayatapi. I think it's sayatapi pasati, pasaya, the optative sense. So sayatapi, which could also mean like suppose one were to see. So here, one doesn't have to actually go in person to the charnel ground. But one could do this imaginatively, assuming that one has some mental conception or some visual impressions of what a decaying corpse looks like. So as though one were to see a corpse thrown aside in the charnel ground, 1, 2, or 3 days dead, bloated, livid, and oozing matter. And then, this is a key point in this meditation, one compares this same body, that is one's own body, with it thus. This body too is of the same nature. It will be like that. It is not exempt from that fate, or it has not escaped that fate. And so in the other type of cemetery meditation, the point is simply to go to the charnel ground, see the corpse, and then meditate directly on the corpse in order to acquire a nimitta, that is the meditative sign or visual image of the corpse in a state of decay, for the purpose of strengthening samadhi or concentration. Here, in contrast, the emphasis is on a reflective contemplation in order to gain some insight into the nature of one's own body and thereby acquire a sense of dispassion or disenchantment with one's own body. And so that's why the key in this contemplation is comparing the body in a state of comparing one's own body with the body in a state of decay. Observing that this body, my own body, is of the same nature. It also will undergo those same changes. It is not exempt from that fate. Okay, then the rest of the meditation just goes through the different stages of decay and deterioration of the corpse, from being devoured by crows, hawks, vultures, and filled with different kinds of worms. These would be the larvae of flies devouring the flesh, Then one comes to the skeleton with flesh and blood, held together with sinews, a fleshless skeleton smeared with blood, held together with sinews, the skeleton without flesh and blood, held together with sinews, then the bones scattered in all directions, and then finally one comes to the corpse thrown aside in the charnel ground, bones bleached white, the color of shells, bones that are heaped up, bones more than a year old, rotted and crumbled to dust. And in each case, one compares one's own body with that in that same way. Okay, now we can take questions. Okay, Barbara.
Hello, testing.
Oh, you, okay.
Hello, testing.
I think it's okay.
Oh, you do? Okay. I'm a retired engineer, and I have a hindrance when I attempt this meditation. And that is that as I go through all the body parts, I see the beautiful functionality and I have trouble trying to find the repulsive nature of them.
Yeah.
And the heart is a beautiful organ.
Yeah.
And so on with the whole list.
Yeah.
I mean, we can pick on the ones that are not so attractive, like the snot.
Yeah.
But it's still a difficult process that I go through.
Yeah. Yeah. I understand that. In fact, you know, I've read some books, or at least parts of books on physiology, and repeatedly I'm just like awed by the magnificent sort of way in which all of these organs of the body are able to perform their functions in harmony, you know, without me having to exercise any volitional control over them. Until I read the book, I don't know what the liver has been doing all of those years, you know, 20-something years. The liver has been doing its job, and I have no knowledge of it, but is functioning perfectly on its own. And I don't have to tell the stomach, get busy, stomach, digest the food. You know, I don't have to tell the lungs, come on, guys, in, out, in, out. But if I'm reading a book, absorbed on the computer, sleeping, the lungs are right there doing their work, expanding, contracting, expanding, contraction. And like, you know, the heart, people are complaining sometimes about the stress of modern life. Nowadays we have to work like 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. Man, the heart is working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every day from the day I was born. It doesn't get a day's vacation. You know, so what I would say to that consideration is that this meditation, like, it's not making an what I would call an absolutist assessment about the nature of the body, but rather it's looking at the body from a particular perspective for people who have a particular like mental kilesa or defilement or affliction, that is, who have like the sensual attachment to their own body or to the body of others, or those who have, you know, pride or conceit in their body. So when you just choose this aspect, the aspect of the unattractive nature of the body, in order to sort of diminish and overcome that attachment, that clinging to the body. And so even the heart, though, I mean, it does a wonderful, magnificent job, And please don't get in any way hurt or insulted. I want you to go on beating for another, 30 years is too much. I don't want that. But you could go on for another 15, 16 years. So don't stop now, Guy. But if you take it out, it doesn't look so pretty. I think the same is true about any part of the body, internal part. And even if you see, I've seen on some of the websites, they have like the beautiful actresses and fashion models. They'll show them the photo when they have the makeup on, then the other photo with the makeup off. And it's quite a difference between the two. And when you see this, was it Angelina Jolie? Is that the name? Okay, with the makeup on, and you see the photo of her with the makeup off. Okay, she's a little pretty, can't deny that, but quite a difference from the way she looks with the makeup on. And Madonna, forget it. Who is that popular singer? Taylor Swift. She's without the makeup, she's still a little pretty, but quite a difference when she has all of the makeup on. So the makeup helps a lot also. Okay, I think Barbara had a question. Please take the microphone.
Yes. First of all, on the pictures of people without makeup, there are some videos of Joan Rivers without makeup that have been on television. She had a real life series where before her surgery she was talking to her daughter. Yeah. And that is strikingly different, absolutely different. But my question has to do with that phrase, and is clung to, that is in the bodily parts. Yeah. What's the significance of that? Because I'm also feeling that all of this about, I never attach to seeing things as repulsive. Yeah. And I think my sense is that the real aim is to approach neutrality, an educated neutrality. Is that a fair reading? Yeah.
First, there seem to be two questions here. First, the expression that's translated "clung to," it's a little bit misleading because it's a word that originally it comes from the word upadana, which means clinging, or the verb upadiyati, what is clung to, but it comes to be used in somewhat of a technical sense. The Pali word is upadina. It comes to be used in the technical sense. I would almost translate it as organic, that which pertains to one's own organic body, as contrasted with things that exist apart from one's body. So for example, if one gets a haircut, while the hair is part of one's body, it's upadina, because it's part of one's organic body, but the hair that's cut off and that sort of falls to the ground, or when we shave the head that gets caught within the razor, then it becomes anupadina. It's no longer part of the organic body. Similarly, when we clip, right now the fingernails are upadina, because they're part of my organic body, but if I clip them, then the clippings become anupadina. They're not clung to. So that is the meaning of that expression. Yeah, then as far as what you put it, you used a very good expression, something neutral. But you used an adjective with it? Considered neutrality? Do you remember?
Educated.
Yeah, that was very good. Educated neutrality. Yeah, so the object, as I said, is not to have this emotional disgust towards the body, but to be able to look at the body from a dispassionate perspective with that kind of neutrality. Yeah, so that the body, the ideal is not to be repelled by the body, not to be attached to the body. Some.
When you went back to the sutta number 62, it talked about the space element.
The space element is included there, yeah.
How is that observed or significant or is it part of the contemplation of the elements?
Well, in the mindfulness of the body, the sutta on the mindfulness of the body, he's taking only the four primary elements, but to do a more comprehensive contemplation of the elements of the body, then the space element is also brought in. And you could see from the way the text is formulated that this is sort of goes in agreement with the Abhidharma explanation of the space element, that it's the empty space in between, what do you call this? In between the contours of things, or the space that defines the contours of things, the space in between unoccupied, or space is the unoccupied areas, rather than, you call it the absolute Newtonian space, which also comes to be considered one of the elements in some schools of Buddhism, the sort of all-embracing, all-comprehensive space. But this is simply what we would call the empty space, unoccupied space. So on page 529, so what is the internal space element? It's that which is space, spatial, and clung to. That is the holes of the airs, the nostrils, the door of the mouth, or rather it would be like the opening of the mouth, and the aperture whereby what is eaten, drunk, consumed, and tasted gets swallowed. That would be the, any medical? Esophagus. And where it collects, that would be the empty space in the stomach. And whereby it is excreted from below, that would be the anus, or or whatever else is empty space within the body. So if one wants to do even a more total contemplation, then we would bring in the space element.
And when you were talking about all the 32 parts of the body, you suggested going back and forth.
Yeah.
What is the purpose? Is that to see the relation between the various parts of the body, or? It
sort of develops what you might call a mental skill in getting familiar with the parts of the body. So it's a kind of a mental agility, so that one can go in forward and reverse order. And also it helps to cover each part several times. So I've also tried doing it just going from head hairs, the beginning point, to the last point, to urine. One could also do it that way if one wants. But I think taking them in groups gives a more concentrated exposure to each part. And when one does it, of course, it should be done at a moderate pace, not too slow, because then the mind will start to drift, but not too quickly, because then one doesn't really pick up a clear perception of each part. Okay, Donna?
Yeah. Oops, I can turn it on.
Do you know which part to speak into?
Can you please
Yeah, maybe can you come up closer? Okay.
It reminds me of scientific training in biology.
Yeah.
Initially I did nursing part, but then, you know, did vertebrate and invertebrate zoology, and you actually dissecting
Yeah.
organisms and
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah.
So you also become aware how it relates, because you study different body systems and comparative physiology.
Yeah.
And the human body, so you start thinking in terms of, you know, projecting your mind into
Yeah.
other species
Yeah.
and humans, and mentally you see the organs and everything.
Yeah.
So it's, you get that kind of feeling of the elements inside.
Yeah.
Way.
Yeah. Okay, I think let us go back to the sutta, because I want to finish the sutta, which the rest doesn't really need very much explanation. Okay, so the theme of the sutta is mindfulness of the body, and now it's interesting that here the Buddha brings in the 4 jhanas as if it comes under mindfulness of the body. And that is because, if you could see from the extended formula for each jhana, starting with the first jhana, it says, after we finish the standard formula, he makes the rapture and pleasure born of seclusion drench, steep, fill, and pervade this body, so that there is no part of the whole body unpervaded by the rapture and pleasure born of seclusion. Okay, then comes the simile of the bath attendant preparing bath powder so that the water pervades the entire ball of soap. Okay, then with the second jhana, after the section 19, after the standard formula, he makes the rapture and pleasure born of concentration drench, steep, fill, and pervade this body. Then with the third jhana, okay, he enters upon and abides in the third jhana. And then he makes the pleasure divested of rapture. That's the sukha without the piti. Drench, steep, fill, and pervade this body so that there is no part of the whole body unpervaded by the pleasure, divested of rapture. And then this is compared to the lotuses that are immersed in the water and that are entirely drenched, steeped, filled, and pervaded by the cool water. And then comes the fourth jhana, so that the meditator then sits pervading this body with the pure, bright mind, so that there is no part of the whole body unpervaded by the pure, bright mind. And so each of these then becomes a mode of developing mindfulness of the body. Okay, then in the following paragraphs, the Buddha praises mindfulness of the body in various ways with different similes. This, because time is running out and I want to finish the sutta today. So you can read this on your own, it doesn't really need explanation. And then the important passage, starting with 32, where the Buddha is going to explain the benefits that arise from mindfulness of the body. So he says, when mindfulness of the body has been repeatedly practiced, developed, cultivated, used as a vehicle, a basis, established, consolidated, and well undertaken, these 10 benefits might be expected. What 10? One becomes a conqueror of discontent and delight, because one developed this solid perception of the body, so one is not overcome by finding delight in external sense pleasures and discontent when one fails to get them. Okay, so one becomes the conqueror of discontent and delight. one becomes the conqueror of fear and dread. You know, particularly, I guess, after one has done the cemetery contemplations, then one has, you know, one has actually faced the stark reality of death. And so now one is not afraid of anything that might threaten this body. Then one is able to bear cold and heat, hunger and thirst, flies, mosquitoes, ill-spoken words, unwelcome words, and painful bodily feelings. Okay, then one attains at will the 4 jhanas. Then one wields the different kinds of supernormal power. Those would really become accessible to those who master the 4 jhanas, and even beyond the 4 jhanas, the 4 formless meditations. So those are the powers like being able to multiply one's body, being able to pass unhindered through walls and mountains. So don't think if you've done a little mindfulness of breathing or a little meditation on 32 parts of the body that you could go flying through the sky and walking on water. Okay, one develops the divine ear element so one could hear sounds, distant sounds, and sounds in other realms of existence. One develops the ability to read and understand the minds of others. One recollects one's past lives, even hundreds and thousands of past lives. One develops the divine eye so that one could see beings passing away and taking rebirth in accordance with their karma. And then finally, one develops or acquires the